So back in the early days of Plastic Addict, I reviewed the repaint of this figure from the Universe line and decided, yeah, it's a really horrible repaint, but the toy itself isn't bad, so I think it's time to give it a much more fair shakedown in its original incarnation. So ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at Beast Wars Silverbolt, one of the original deluxe Fusors and one of two, well, three if you count Tigerhawk, to actually end up in the show, which is probably why it's so well remembered, but at the same time, hey, they might just be right. As you can see, he is half wolf, half eagle, and we are one beast head away from having my ideal griffin transformer. If only I knew a way of putting an eagle head on you. But for now, we're going to judge it for what it is. And it's a really good mix of all the Beast Wars figures that try to cram two animals together. I think this is one of the cleanest and nicest jobs overall. And I mean that in more than one way. If you look at the underbelly, even that has a lot of fur molding to it and hides a lot of the robot mode parts. There's really not a whole lot of the bot exposed, aside from some extra hinges here. And yeah, you can kind of see the arms there, but hey, you kind of have to look for it there, don't you? Everything besides that is exceptional. I mean, let's take a look for starters. You've got gray plastic, pretty much casting the entire toy, but it is loaded with paint to avoid it from looking just plain old gray. Look at the wings. I mean, that's an absolutely beautiful airbrushing job all the way across the back. This nice copper and all of this dark gray letting into the tips and the center of the back. Exceptionally well done, and you've got kind of a pearl white paint around here for the tail feathers. Really amazingly done. And on the bottom side too, this is something you just would not see Hasbro do to any level these days, getting all of this paint in and trying to include as many details in the paint job as possible. You know, they paint the top of the wings and call it a day, most likely. You also have the bird legs at the front here, which is done up in that same metallic copper paint, and little bits here and there. They left a lot of that gray showing through, which I think is more of a credit to the robot mode than the beast mode, but hey, it is what it is. It still doesn't look bad, though. I do like, they got selected with some of the details, but I like it overall. I think it's an exceptionally well done job. And then we get to the head with these bright yellow eyes, which of course not accurate to an actual wolf. I think you need some pupils in there somewhere. A lot of that dark gray now around the snout and the brow, and the teeth individually painted. Extremely good job. You can see the lips snarling around there too. They made sure to include everything. You can see just how well the molding works. You see all the fur going up the back, blending into the feathers here. It's kind of a rough cutoff point, going from fur to feather everywhere, but thanks to all the colors kind of working together very well, it's kind of hard to peg out, and again, it's something you really have to look for to catch. So overall, the beast mode itself, just so cool. You also have articulation points, of course, since this is Beast Wars. Ball joints here at the back hips and at the shoulders. You get hinging here at the elbows, and here at the beast mode legs, you actually do have a hinge that works both for the front and the back of the leg. So you can raise it up for clawing actions, you can squeeze it together, you can adjust it for different poses and get different balance. Works out really well. You also have kind of a knee joint here, but it starts to expose the arm unless you adjust. So it's a little bit weird to use, but it's also available to you. And that gives you a lot of posing range. You can also hinge up the wings to make it look like he is in mid-flap. And speaking of flap, you can also pull back on the tail for a little bit of gearing gimmick. These forward flapping wings. Now I have to be careful with these because you see those big things sticking out of his wings. It's not battle damage. It's not exposed part. Well, it is an exposed part, but if I pull hard enough, those buttons are going to hit just enough plastic on here to launch that suspiciously unpainted feather at the tip of both wings. And I really don't want to have to do it because I have to show off. Something else with these missiles. later on. So I think I'll save that until we get to robot mode. Just for now, no, the wing flapping is neat. Alright, so I'm going to get these folded up again just to get them out of the way. And let's go ahead and get this guy transformed. I'm going to start flipping up the back of his head and flipping his head all the way down there. That out of the way. All of this hinges down and forms up right there. With that pelvis in place, we can tab it in with a skirt. Straighten out the forearm legs to create the robot legs. Kind of like that they use the front for the legs and then the back legs become the arms because proportionally it works a little bit better. Split it down here. Get these double hinges, very long struts, but they work. Fold that in. Forms up, pegs in place like so. Now we can fold the beast legs backward to the back of the arms. That will pretty much auto-morph the arms in a weird way. From there, the head flips up like so. Close in the chest piece, and we'll go ahead and fold down the tail feathers just to get us a little bit of a cleaner back. And just like that, we have the ever noble, the ever heroic Beast Wars Silverbolt, ever the Boy Scout. And here, looking quite a bit like his animation model. Season 2, they tried a lot harder to make those models match the toys. Whereas you got a lot of figures like Rhinox and such taking a lot of liberties. They mostly stayed intact for Season 2. Thus, this guy's looking quite a bit more like you expect him to. Looking in at the head, it's again cast in that gray plastic, which, yeah, I've not seen anything on here that was not gray. All the cresting around the eyes, that top fin mohawk thing. Bit of a skunk look to him that way, but that is definitely Silverbolt the way we remember him. Little teeth grimacing in robot mode and all. It's also kind of followed an interesting kind of aesthetic point where he definitely has a lot more animal to his robot mode head than your standard Beast Wars toy. I think that kind of came from being done up around the same time as the Transmetals, where the robot modes were the ones that had more organic detail than the Beast modes that were mostly robotic. Looking around at more detail that has been exposed, we get some of that nice metallic copper there as the chest piece, as well as some here on the front skirt, which is an interesting design pattern to it. Kind of looks like an ant hanging down from his waist. A little bit weird. But beyond that, everything's pretty much carried over. The legs get that same copper because that's where they were before. And the arms are pretty much bare, which is a little bit unfortunate because around here the gray does kind of dominate pretty heavily. And it could have used a little bit more, maybe just a little bit of tone here in the arms or a little bit more of the copper just to break things up. You know, there's absolutely no dark gray in this mode rather than the head, so that probably should have come into play a little bit more for the robot. Except you have this here in the center, this big maw at the center. This looks like a sarlacc pit in his stomach. I'm not entirely sure what the idea was here, but he's got this bright red midsection. The bright red appears nowhere else on this whole toy. I don't know if this is supposed to be exposed spark or what. I know later on this is kind of where they started putting, they put the Autobot symbol on the Universe version here, because it is really a standout spot. It's kind of strange just to see, because there's not really a whole lot it's doing, and I can't tell what it's supposed to be. I don't know, it kind of looks like he's wearing like a Kamen Rider belt now that I look at it that way. So there's another custom someone's probably going to do at some point. But beyond that, the proportions work out really well. And while he is a Beast Wars toy, so he does have some kibble going on, rear beast mode legs still hanging out behind the arms, and we did fold down the tail, but it only did so much to clean up that area. You know, not a whole lot to do. Could fold down the belly. See, can't really get anything else out of that. This is one of those points where it's just kind of, you can hinge it down, you can kind of work it, but there's really no point to anything, really. It doesn't really help. But beyond that, Everything else is pretty much clean. I like the silhouette of the robot mode. I like how everything's going on. And the wing placement is interesting because typically it works as like a backpack. And here you get more of like a shoulder armor thing going on. It's a bit of an interesting look, if a bit difficult to put in a display shelf if you're a collector like me. Now, I did say there were other things I could do with these missiles hanging out in the front, so I'll go ahead and disengage and show you. They do have a small peg on the back, which is Silverbolt, don't embarrass me now, which is going to allow you to peg them into his hands, and you've seen him do this in the show, and actually use them as melee weapons, which is a pretty nice dual use of the missiles. And one of those things where, like, I'm not a fan of just having missiles lying around. You know, they kind of take up space in a storage bin or in the shelves. So this is a nice way of actually dealing with them and giving them more to do than just hang out in here waiting for the inevitable day for that spring or latch to fail and something go flying across my room when I'm least expecting it. Those days get scary. Missiles start flying. It looks like, looks like a war going on in my room. It's not pretty. But, of course, there is gimmick to this guy. They do fire off. Make sure you get them in the right side because they only go in one side. Both missiles are unique, so can't mix them up. Alright, so this is the part I really didn't want to get to, but hey, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do this review right. So yeah, if I pull these feathers, this tail fin, hard enough, it's gonna hit those buttons against the chest piece on him. This is the one part where folding this belly down helps, because you do get a little bit of molding inside. Pretend that's a thruster, but you need that point right there to hold your thumb in so you can get enough of a grip to launch the missiles like so. And one of them fell into my little spare part bin by my review stage. So that's actually perfect. I wish I could arrange that permanently. So yeah, I do like that. I'm not a big fan of firing off missiles like automatically. I'd rather just fire them manually after I, aim them. And it would have been cool if they fired forward, but that's a lot of range those wings would have to have in order to do that. It's a really weird way of firing the missiles because, as you saw, they kind of go 90-degree diagonal. And I don't know about you, but I've tried using those before in various video games. If you're playing Binding of Isaac and your tears start doing that, your run's done. So, while it's a neat little trick and it's a neat little effect of the wings flying forward and firing off the launched missiles, the angle does make it a little bit unwieldy to use that way. So let's actually go into articulation, which he does a little bit better than he does gimmicking. Well, the head does rotate. It's quite restricted in there, but you get a little bit of range out of it. Not a whole lot, unfortunately. Ball joints at the shoulders. Ball joints at the wrists, too. And you still have that transformation hinge. So he has a ton of room in those elbows. No waist. I don't mean to make that a thing. I just review a lot of these toys that have no waist joint. I don't know why. Ball joints in the hips that have a really good range. Knee joints to the 90-degree, and we still have all of that play in the ankles going back and forth, as well as the heel, which helps him hold his balance in interesting poses. So he does have quite a bit he can do. Like any Beast Wars figure, he kind of lives and dies by how stiff those ball joints are. Mine, without a whole lot of play, he works pretty well. I'm quite happy with the level of articulation, though for me, like, a little bit more range in the neck would have been good, just so he can be a little bit more expressive, especially since he is a character with enough range to really get into some decent weapon wielding poses with his missiles, which are currently about 3 feet away from me, and I really don't want to stop the review to go get them. One thing I will point out before we wrap up here, as you can see on the forearms, yeah, he does have some plastic hollowing, just in case you thought that was something they started doing recently to be cheap. No, even back to the 90s, they were doing this, though they were doing it in clever ways here. You can actually see it has a little bit of a piston or like a hydraulic look to it. So it does look like an actual piece of mechanics. But the neat one is at the thigh points, where If I can get the thigh out enough, I can show you. It's shaped like a dog bone. That was always my favorite little design touch. You know, it's such a cool hidden thing. Like, as long as you've got to have the plastic there to keep the parts sturdy, you might as well have some fun with it and make it interesting, you know? Why not? So, ladies and gentlemen, that is Beast Wars Silverbolt. Still a very solid deluxe toy, who I was very unfair to just because it had a very Joker-esque paint job once upon a time. This one's one of the better ones, especially because he does match up with his cartoon a little bit better. Awkward gimmick aside and a few little minor nitpicks about the posability level, I still really like the figure.